So jumping straight into the game changers, I'd like to welcome on stage. I mentioned earlier, actually, that my mother's biggest fear is not robotics. She's not afraid of robots, taking our jobs or anything. She's fine with that, She should love a robot to make her tea, because apparently I don't make great tea. But what she is terrified of is digital currency. So she's terrified of, the concept of Bitcoin. And our next speaker, Kale Sharrock, is the founder and managing partner of Nimbus Technologies. And he's someone with several years of experience in the cryptocurrency space. So I'm very excited to hear what he has to say. Perhaps he could give me, some words of advice to calm down my mother's fear of Bitcoin. Kindly welcome to the stage, Kale Sharrock.
So while we get set up, I just want to take the temperature of the room. So who here has absolutely no idea how Bitcoin works and is just kind of hoping to get a little bit of insight today? Actually, okay, that's fantastic. And your mom, she's watching on YouTube. On Facebook. And and where are my Bitcoin experts? Contributed code to Bitcoin Core. All right, a couple. Okay, cool. So I think this is going to be hopefully quite an informative session for you, because what I really want to talk about is, do you really need a blockchain? So Bitcoin is actually pretty boring, and what's really interesting is the technology behind Bitcoin. Okay. This is the soundbite that the financial industry and the banking sector has been rolling out for the last couple of years. What I want to do today is kind of examine that meme a little bit and discuss what this word blockchain really actually means. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll kind of agree with me that whole blockchain, not Bitcoin soundbite is kind of disingenuous and doesn't make any sense at all. So what do we mean when we say blockchain? Well, personally, when you see the word blockchain in the media or spoken by the financial institutions and saying they're interested in the blockchain technology, what I think they're talking about, I hope, is blockchain with a capital B. This is what I'm going to say, blockchain with a capital B. And when you say blockchain with a capital B, what you're really talking about is cryptocurrency. These two terms are often conflated. And I'll often say blockchain when I mean cryptocurrency. And when you talk about cryptocurrency, usually you're talking about Bitcoin, because it is the most dominant cryptocurrency of the many, many hundreds out there. And the reason I say blockchain with a capital B is what we're talking about is because blockchain with a small b is really just one piece of the puzzle that makes up Bitcoin. And to be honest, and I think you'll see shortly, is that it's not a terribly interesting piece. So if people are talking about small b blockchain, they're not really saying anything interesting, so they must be talking about big B blockchain, which means they are talking about Bitcoin, and so this whole blockchain, not Bitcoin thing just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let's dive in a little bit and see what the hell I'm talking about. Bitcoin is really made up of 4 big ideas. And the first idea is actually this idea of a blockchain. Now, what is a blockchain? It's basically a list of information, a list of items. So your to-do list, your shopping list, or whatever. You can imagine anything, a list of items. But a blockchain has this feature where every item has a link to the previous item in the list. So what you need to be able to build a blockchain is some sort of function that compresses your item into a little fingerprint, and you include that fingerprint with the next item on the list. And what that gives you is this chain of data where if you change anything in the chain, you change the fingerprint, and so you break that chain. And what that gives you is tamper evidence. So in a blockchain, nobody can change anything in the history of the document without everybody knowing about it. Or you have to recalculate every fingerprint of every item in the list to reconstitute the blockchain and reinstate its integrity. So that's really all a blockchain is. the second idea, and by the way, blockchain, the idea of a blockchain is not really that new. So, I mean, who's downloaded stuff on BitTorrent? I'm sure it's all legal. So BitTorrent uses this idea that when you've downloaded your file, it's taken little fingerprints of each little bit of the file that you've downloaded, and it checks the file against those fingerprints to make sure that nothing was corrupted while you were downloading the file. So you can watch Game of Thrones knowing that there's not going to be any glitches. BitTorrent's much older than Bitcoin, right? So the novelty of Bitcoin is certainly not the blockchain in itself. The next piece of technology in Bitcoin are digital signatures. Now, digital signatures are basically some fancy mathematics, but at the end of the day, what it is it's two sets of numbers, one that you keep secret and one that you can publish to the world. And using those numbers, there's a special mathematical relation between them that allows you to sign a message digitally that anybody in the world can take that public piece of information and convince themselves that that message had to have come from you and no one else. Only the person who knows that, what we call the secret key, is able to sign that message. So as long as you are sure that that public piece of information is linked to the person that's sending you that information, you know that the message comes from them and not from anyone else. Okay, that's really important. In Bitcoin, that's used to prove that you own your Bitcoin. So knowledge of a private key is, in fact, ownership of Bitcoin. If you lose your keys, you can lose your Bitcoin. So blockchain gives you tamper evidence, not tamper proof, tamper evidence. So it lets you detect changes in the history of your list of items, and digital signatures allow you to prove ownership of digital things. Now, digital signatures are, in fact, decades old. And you use them all the time. Every time you're on your browser and you see the little lock in the corner, what that tells you is that you're using digital signatures to sign every piece of information that's going from you to the server, whether it's your bank or Netflix or what have you. Every piece of information is signed so that your browser knows and the server knows that there's no one in the middle changing anything. It's proof that the messages that you're getting across the internet are coming from who you think it is. Okay. Then thirdly, and this is getting into more of the interesting stuff and the more Bitcoin, what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin, is this idea of a public ledger. Now, every single digital currency that was proposed up to the advent of Bitcoin had the same problem, right? Digital currency is digital. Digital things are super easy to make copies of, right? So how do we stop this idea of Alice sending some digital currency to Bob and then making a copy of it and then sending it to Charlie, right? This is called the double spend problem. And this was the kind of central problem around digital currencies. And every single digital currency proposal up until the advent of Bitcoin solved this problem in the same way, by having a central authority. The central authority maintained a ledger of everyone's account balances so that when Alice sends digital money to Bob, it has to go through the central server and they'll make a list on their ledger and say, okay, we'll debit Alice's balance and we're going to credit Bob's balance. And now when she makes a copy and tries to send that same money to Charlie, that central authority will go, hang on, that's already been spent, we're going to decline that transaction. So the key insight that Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, had is that, well, we're going to get rid of the central authority by still using a ledger of tracking every transaction, but we're going to spread it around. So everyone in this room gets to have the ledger, and when I want to send money, you're all going to tell each other about the fact that I want to send money, and you all record it on your ledger. And what happens is we compare notes, and when I try and double spend, we all say, oh no, look, most of us have the fact that Alice sent money to Bob, so we're going to decline that transaction. The key factor here is that as long as the majority of people have the transactions on their ledger, that's defined as it happened. Okay. So as long as you control more than half of the ledgers, you can control what happens on the ledger. Again, this is not a terribly new idea. If you think about it, Wikipedia is a public ledger. Now, Wikipedia predates Bitcoin by 10 years. But we can argue about how distributed it is, but it is an open set of information that anybody can edit. It's a public ledger. And the reason Bitcoin works, the reason Wikipedia works, is that there are more honest people trying to maintain the integrity of the information there than there are trolls trying to put out false information. So it's that same sort of idea. As long as the majority is honest, it works. But the majority has to be honest. So now we come to the final piece of the puzzle. And this, to me, is really the most interesting. There we go. And that's proof of work. So far, if we've got these three technologies, we've got tamper evidence, we've got a public ledger, which means we don't have a central point of failure, and we've got proof of ownership. The problem with just those three, is that if the people running the ledgers had to collude and get together, they could rewrite the history. They could change the blockchain, and they could say, well, listen, we want to censor this person's money transmission because we think they're, politically not of the right color or something. They can get together and rewrite history at no cost. And that's a problem. And so this is really the most interesting part of Bitcoin, is the proof of work. So Satoshi said, well, why don't we make it really expensive to change the history? And so what he said is, every time you add a block to the blockchain or some entries to the ledger, you have to add this little puzzle. You have to provide a solution to this puzzle. And this puzzle is super interesting because solving this puzzle is it's so statistically unlikely, it's like statistically impossible that you could solve this puzzle without spending a certain amount of energy, spending a certain number of CPU cycles. And because energy is basically a global commodity, we could basically say you can't solve this puzzle without spending a certain amount of money. And what's pretty cool is we can tune how difficult that puzzle is, so we can say exactly how much money you need to spend in order to solve this puzzle. So now because we're requiring as part of the Bitcoin protocol that you provide this proof of work with every transaction or every set of transactions called a block, we can make it very expensive for people to collude and rewrite history because they have to redo that proof of work every time they want to change something. And just to give you an idea, as of today, it would cost you about $900,000 an hour to run enough computing power to rewrite history on the Bitcoin blockchain. So if you want to change a transaction from yesterday, you're talking $30-odd million. So it's just, the incentives are, it's just basically not worth it. The people maintaining these ledgers are just incentivized to just play by the rules because it's just too expensive for them to do anything else. And that's really the interesting part about Bitcoin. It should be called proof of work technology and not blockchain technology, because that's the most interesting part of the four big ideas. So hopefully that's a reasonable introduction to all of this. And, look, blockchain technology, you see I'm using the word blockchain with a capital B, it's had a lot of hype around it. And people tend to get super excited about it. And that's understandable because Bitcoin is an amazing invention. And what happens is you can read the white paper and it just clicks, right? You realize, damn, this is world changing. And all of a sudden, it's a hammer looking for a solution and we're going to blockchain everything, right? But what I'd like us to do is say, well, let's look at those four technologies and ask ourselves, do we need everything in those four circles? Do we need those technologies and the solutions those technologies are solving, and do they match up with the problem that we're trying to solve? And I think if we go through that process, the more you go through that process, you learn that the set of problems that blockchain technology really solves is somewhat limited. It's not just money, but I think it is far more limited than most people think. And if we just go through this process, we can avoid the kind of situation that happened with the R3 consortium, which was a group of 200 to 300 odd banks who were going to revolutionize interbank settling. And after a couple of years and several $1 million, they decided, we don't actually need a blockchain. So, if they had just come and spoken to me, I could have saved them maybe about $50 million. but hopefully you won't make that same mistake.
Thanks so much for that. I can tell you right now, Kale, that you had my mother's attention up until the point you said Bitcoin is an amazing invention. After that, you lost her completely. I get so excited whenever I see a female's name on a speaker list, right? Because I'm all about that representation. And our next speaker, Veronica Coots, is a young and upcoming blockchain engineer with a love for teaching and growing the blockchain community. She is a project manager for Ribbon Blockchain, as well as the blockchain developer for Molecule Protocol. Please welcome to the stage, Veronica Coots.
Sorry guys, it's a struggle being tall. Hi.
It's a struggle being short.
It goes both ways. Can you hear me fine? Perfect. So I'm Veronica. I guess I don't need to do an introduction now. Oh, yes, okay. So I'm specifically going to be talking about the Ethereum blockchain, which is like the Bitcoin blockchain, except you can program on it. So you can make a program that lets you move around tokens and coins. But I will get to that, I promise. Okay, so you kind of covered all of this. But why there's so much hype around blockchains is because it takes away this centralized aspect that most technologies today have. You know, when big companies get hacked, it's because there was one server and someone managed to find a way into that one server. Whereas with distributed ledgers, everyone has the server. So now it's much more difficult to hack because you can just get it. So now you're inherently protecting your data when you put it on because you know it's public. So that way it's much harder to hack the blockchain because it's all public anyway. So now we get on to the exciting stuff. So in Ethereum, you can create a token. So like a cryptocurrency, except you can put more brains behind it. It's not just money. So an NFT is like a rand, okay? So you know how 1 rand equals another rand, and you can trade them freely, like there's no difference. An NFT has a unique ID, like a serial number kind of vibe, right? And what this means is now you can have a token that is not worth another token. They're unique, it's like artworks, you know? You can't just trade one artwork for another. That's not gonna go well. And what these unique tokens enable is digital scarcity. So what you can do with these tokens is pretty much everything, within reason. Okay, there we go. So if I show you this GIF, and I ask you to tell me where it's from, or who made it, or if I had the correct permissions to be able to show you it, you can't. There's no way you can prove the provenance of this. But if I was to associate an NFT with this, one of those tokens, and say that this GIF is this token, you can now see everyone who's ever had it, traded it, used it, seen it, sold it. You can trace the provenance of it back to the creator. And what this enables is digital artworks. You can create digital scarcity. So I don't know how many of you are on the creative side, but if you've ever drawn a digital artwork and put it on the internet, you can't sell it now because everyone can just make a copy, you know? Like, it's kind of worthless, but you put a lot of effort in. So what you can do with these NFTs is say, my artwork is this NFT, and there's only 10 of this NFT. So you create digital scarcity. So now only 10 people can own a verifiable copy of this image. Sure, people can copy it, but it's no longer verifiable. This is CryptoKitties. CryptoKitties took this idea of the NFT with a unique ID, and they made the unique ID determine how the cats look. So each of those cats is completely unique, and how they look, how they dress, and their cute little hats is all determined by that unique serial ID, which means you can breed them together, and it takes just parts of both of their serial IDs to create a completely new kitty. And they're verifiable, they're tradable, and they're unique. Okay, this is Known Origin, which is digital artwork platform. So it allows you as a digital artist to upload your artwork. Say how many copies you want to be available. So let's say 100. And you can set a price. And now there are exactly 100 copies of your artwork that are verifiably ownable. They're very cool. Go check them out. Who's this? Okay. So this company did something very clever. They took, so we were talking about BitTorrent, right? Piracy is a bit of an issue right now for creators, the people actually making movies. Because, once the movie's on the internet, you're not really going to pay for it if you can just schneid it somewhere, So what they have done is inside the video, they embed a private key. So we were talking about private keys. So they actually embed the private key into the video. So let's say you're doing a movie pre-release to 100 people. Each 100 people get a copy of the movie with its own unique private key in it. That way, if the movie leaks, they can go and see, hey, this movie has your private key in it. Why did you leak the movie? It now makes you accountable to your actions. And they can do it with videos, documents, photos, GIFs, anything you can think of. They can embed the private key into it. So now you're holding people accountable to their actions, which is actually a really big problem with movie pre-releases. A lot of pre-releases get leaked. Right, so in summary, Ethereum is a programmable blockchain. So instead of it just having cryptocurrencies, you can program the cryptocurrencies to do things, which is amazing. And you can trace it, you can prove provenance, and it's completely trackable and completely open. And yeah, that's me.
I don't know about you, but I love how excited Veronica is about the work that she does. You can just feel it. She's got this energy. She's ready to go. Our next and our last speaker, Michael. Michael, you are making my job very difficult. He has been featured as one of Fast Company's 20 under 30 in African Independence Top 40 under 40, and his company, Argumentors, in Brainstorm magazine as one of the most innovative tech startups. Right, your bio is so intimidating. Michael Dion, please welcome to the stage.
Okay, can you guys hear me fine? Or is it too soft? Cool. Where's the clicker? Okay. So, with my other crypto homies here, they've already explained this. You guys are all professional and experts on the blockchain at the moment, so I'm going to skip that slide. So I'm going to go ahead with how blockchain can impact the gaming industry and what we have done at my company so far. So if you look at the current state of transactions for gaming items online, a TechCrunch statistic shows that 7 out of 8 transactions are actually fraudulent, chargebacks and fraudulent sales of in-game items. This is one of the things that blockchain actually can solve, and we'll get into it along the way. Okay, so features that could be harnessed from the blockchain is transactions that are verifiable. So there's no chargebacks, no fraudulent transactions go through. It's consensus amongst all the participants in the network. Full chronological list of events, for example, the transactions that take place, allowing anyone to trace and audit prior transactions. The technology operates as a distributed rather than centralized ledger, which they've gone into great details about. So an example, a use case is our company Argumentors. It's a blockchain augmented reality game where you can battle anyone in the world using mobile device. Think of Pokemon Go on steroids with blockchain. Yeah, so we were one of the early adopters of trying to produce an a blockchain-based company, a gaming company. We were able to show our vision off in 2017 and do a token sale, which is kind of like a crowdfund on crypto assets. We were able to raise $1 million in 30 days to produce this project. So we're building upon the Ethereum blockchain, which Veronica's gone through. There's a number of blockchains out there, but what we focus on is the Ethereum blockchain, so we'll go through that. So what made this whole thing unique? So Veronica did touch on some of this, but this will be more focused on the gaming industry. Fungible tokens are unique, so 1-to-1 ratio. You can trade gold for gold, gems for gems inside the game. Every single token is the same thing. There's no differentiation between the two. On the other side of the coin is that we have non-fungible tokens, which are represented as something unique. So no two tokens are the same. These store unique characteristics, stats, who owned it before, who owns it now, the full history will all be recorded inside that token. So these cards, characters, spells, abilities, skins, literally anything you want can be tokenized within this ecosystem. So you can truly own your assets. You can trade, swap at your own will. There's no need for a third party. You have full ownership of your assets. For example, if you bought a badass pink gun from Call of Duty, the next iteration that comes out and they don't migrate that information, you won't be able to actually use that gun again. You lost your money, for example, if it's $10. Whereas this, you can transfer game to game, a whole bunch of other things we'll get into now. And these also create scarcity, similar to what Cryptocurrency was about. The image of a little PNG cat, some of them were going for an absurd amount of like $100,000 for a cat picture. So cross-game assets is one of the other amazing features you can get from the blockchain. So, for example, if Mario Kart was really keen on our characters, they could add that token within their game, and you could have, let's still think about some more, like Pokemon, for example. You can have Pikachu racing next to Mario Kart if they allowed that token to be transferable and used in that game. Let's see here. Another cool thing is that you can have special event tokens. So if you happen to go to, do a collab with Adidas, people will come to the Adidas store, battle a rare monster, defeat it, and your Pikachu will have a badass Adidas hoodie wrapped over it, which will only be if you go to that event. So how these whole things get transferred is through smart contracts. So the contracts are designed to help secure safe, fair peer-to-peer transactions that run on the ledger, withdrawing all the need for fraudulence and transactions. A key feature of this, if you want to sell your assets on the app, you'll be able to lodge, for example, a shield that you have and state that you want either gold or a different item to swap. Once you send off your item through, the smart contract will do what it's programmed to do and transfer everything. Without third parties, we don't get anything out of it. It's completely yours. You can do what you want. So you guys are like, cool, Mike, I dig this shit. How do I get into my game? I don't have time, I don't have money to go and learn about blockchain. I don't have time to figure this out. And I am an indie dev. I don't have the cash. And I get that. So there's a company called Engine. It's not a paid shill. I really appreciate what they're doing for the community, for the gaming industry, so I'm kind of just sharing what they do. So they allow you to tokenize assets all within one app. You can easily mint items, weapon, characters, skins, currencies, fungible, non-fungible, with a click of a button. The full history of the assets stays with it forever. Assets you can trade and sell within the app, and also melting assets. We're going to key points from all those. So on the Engine platform, creating tokens, you require the Engine token itself, which is kind of like the raw material you need to create the asset. So you would buy the Engine token to then set a price limit to if you want to do a magical sword. That sword, you paid 10 engine tokens to produce 10 of those. Each one will be worth 1 engine token at the base price. You can set the minimum value of that at your own discretion. The next is trading. You'll be able to trade within the app itself to all third parties. Any app that's used the engine platform or any ERC 721 or 1155 tokens will be able to be transferable within the app itself. So all the cards, example cards, but we're talking about skins, characters, all that is not stored in any game servers. It's all stored on the wallet, digital wallets. Yeah, so as with the engine token, you actually can set a transaction fee. So every time guys trade these assets, the developers will get a small cut out of it. You also can bound items that are not non-transferable. So if you get, for example, you guys came to this event, I gave you all this rare item that you only can get from being over here. You won't be able to transfer it if it's bound, but you'll have one of a kind item. The Engine Wallet is a mobile app. It will host all your assets from all different games that are a part of the Engine platform. So you're able to view, manage, and sort all your crypto assets and coins very easily. Fast coin management, detailed info of all transactions you had, the current value of your assets you have, the last traded price for it. Yeah, and then melting. So in games, you have a plethora of the same item. You kind of have no use to it. It's worth much. You can melt the actual digital item, which would develop the money back in engine tokens to buy more assets. And then from that, you can go buy new assets afterwards. Lastly, all this is available through SDKs for Unity and Unreal Engine. So again, developers have direct access to all this. Click the button, so there's no need for you to go and learn everything by yourself. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. As I've mentioned previously, welcome to our living room. We are your guests, and I think would love to hear your response to each one's presentation. I know the theme was centrally the same, but you each brought something different. Perhaps you could speak to that.
Now it is. Cool. So in my introduction, I really wanted to set the stage of what really is running the engine behind all these things. But maybe this is a good time to talk about the project I'm currently working on, because it fits in perfectly with what Veronica and Michael were talking about. And I'm working on a project called Tari. We're based here in Johannesburg, and we are laser focused on making a platform for non-fungible tokens and digital assets. And I think it's at this point we need to be clear what we mean by digital assets, because there are problems with things that are not purely digital. So when we say digital assets, we mean things that live and die in the digital space: tickets, loyalty points, CryptoKitties, collectible card games, all these sort of things. This is what we are already developing. And we're developing it with this framework in mind that I was talking about. Is where do we need a blockchain? Why do we need a blockchain? And where do we not need a blockchain in order to solve certain problems? So I found it really interesting that there's a huge amount of overlap, even though we may come from kind of ideological different backgrounds. And what I'd like to maybe pitch a question to Michael, which you can answer at some point, is what were the pain points for developing your digital asset system on Ethereum in particular? Because that's something I'd love to dive into. And then another thing we might be able to talk about a little bit is the whole provenance thing that Veronica mentioned briefly, is that when you talk about provenance, it's how do you bring real-world information into the blockchain in a trustless way? And that's actually a really tough problem, and potentially not even solvable, or not by people as dumb as me. So these are some of the things that we didn't really get into the conversation, but in the broader conversation about where blockchain technology is applicable in various industries, like the creative industry, these things come up really quickly, and it's really good to kind of get a handle on it.
Okay, cool. It's working. Hello. Okay, cool. So we actually did the ICO or token sale during February 2017, I think. It was before the ICO boom, the whole crazy thing. And we actually only took Bitcoin as the fundraising token, and we were building on top of Counterparty, which is a Bitcoin blockchain predominantly token. So we weren't touching Ethereum yet. So only about a year afterwards, we switched to Ethereum after the cryptocurrency mania and kind of blocked. Most of the transactions were done on the Ethereum blockchain. So we kind of like, the other blockchains I would have preferred to have built upon, but the other shareholders, so had to go that way. So I'm not like a huge advocate for Ethereum, but yeah, so I'm not going to say much.
I'm going to explain something first because like it's important on my question. So gas is this thing on Ethereum that allows you, it's like, so when you send a transaction, right, you were talking about proof of work. Someone has to do work for that transaction to get like mined, added to the blockchain, right? So on Ethereum, you put in a tiny little bit of ether, which is the native like cryptocurrency on Ethereum. And that goes with your transaction. And that actually goes to the miners to pay for them like doing all that work. So how do you deal with fluctuating prices of gas? Like, do you make people buy ether? Like, how do you deal with that?
So we actually found a way, so we worked with Apple themselves, that guys can buy the assets on the app via fiat. And then from that, we will then just deposit, so we will generate an Ethereum wallet on the actual thing, and part of the fee of buying the character would pay for the transaction fee. Okay. So we try to make it as easy as possible for guys that aren't in the blockchain space, who don't know anything about crypto, and it's all scary and all this wild stuff, that we would just make it hidden per se. And the guys that are advocates for it would get the value and understand it. So when it becomes more accessible and knowledgeable in the general ecosystem, then we would say, hey, no, all your assets are freaking.
Because I've struggled with that.
It is a bit of a pain.
In your talk, you were saying how like blockchain is not for everything. And I think that's so ironic because as a blockchain developer, everyone approaches me and they're like, I have an idea for an app. And I listen to it and it'll always be, it's this, but on the blockchain. And I'm like, well, there's a reason it's not on the blockchain. I just think it's fascinating. Like, what's your experience been with like people just saying, oh, put it on the blockchain?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same experience. So, yeah, you know, what you have to always ask is, what do you get? What are the costs and benefits of using something on the blockchain? Because at the end of the day, right, blockchain is like a database, but it's a really slow, really, and I mean really, if you're on Bitcoin, it's a really expensive database. Like I said, it's $900,000 an hour to maintain the blockchain database. But that's the price you pay for a non-censorable, decentralized, self-sovereign money that, you know, the government can't come in and take a haircut because they feel like they need to pay off their deficit, which is what happened in Cyprus in 2008. You know, the banks can't close your account because you're growing weed in Colorado, and you know they're scared of the federal government imposing stuff on them, so people are just unbanked. You know, Bitcoin is apolitical and non-gender biased, and it just is. All right, it just follows its rules according to mathematics, and that's what you get. If you don't need that, you should be asking, well, do I really need a database? Do I need a blockchain? So, but that's not to say there aren't other blockchain type things that you can build that are similar, but not blockchain with a capital B, which is what a lot of people go down and end up doing. So for example, Libra, you know Libra? Who's heard of Libra? It's Facebook's currency, right? So that's not really a blockchain. That is what's called a Byzantine fault tolerant system, where it's everything that I showed you except the proof of work. Does it have blockchain? It doesn't really even have a blockchain, but it's a bunch of people, it's a bunch of ledgers that are agreeing with each other, and as long as 2/3 of them are honest, the whole thing's going to work. And Facebook says, well, we're going to make you pay $10 million to be one of those ledgers, so you better, and we know where you live, so you better play the rules, and we're going to keep you honest. And so you don't get this kind of completely decentralized, open, fair system, but on the other hand, you get these benefits, like it's really fast. You know, you can offer the kind of user experience that people are going to expect. So and this is why I was asking you about your experience on Ethereum, because one of our use cases is tickets. So we have a company called Big Neon. It's selling tickets already in the US. And we eventually want to put that on the blockchain, but we don't really build a blockchain because it needs to be fast, right? If someone's waiting to get into a club or a concert and they got their ticket and they scan it, if it was on Bitcoin, you'd have to wait like 10 minutes for it to get confirmed on average. On Ethereum, it's about 15 seconds. That's just too long. Like, you can't, that's unacceptable. The other thing is, like, how many transactions per second does a typical ticketing company need to handle? Well, the answer is 0, and then there's an on sale, like a Beyonce concert, and then it's infinite demand, and then it's 0 again once all the tickets are sold out. That kind of use case doesn't work on a proof-of-work blockchain at all. All right, so you know, that's the kind of problem that we grapple with, is like, how do we get that user experience that people want, and also satisfy some of these, utilize some of the benefits that some of these blockchain adjacent technologies offer us?
That's a good answer.
I think this is a great time to just open up the floor to some questions. Questions from the audience.
I don't buy it.
Okay, right over there.
On Tari, do your assets include film, television, animation content?
So right now we're still building the technology. The idea is that it's not up to us to build the digital assets on it. It's up to you guys to build it. We're just creating the open source technology to allow people to create and issue digital assets that everyone love and use. And our focus is to make it really user-friendly and really simple. So actually a question for Veronica would be, like, they do Ethereum training, right? How much of that training is on ERC20, ERC720 contracts and nothing else? By the way, just FYI, an ERC20 contract is an Ethereum smart contract that is a fungible token.
Yeah, so it's like money. One is worth another one.
Yeah, and a 720 is like a non-fungible token, like the cards or
The
collectibles,
kitties.
the cryptokitties, what
Yeah.
have you. Okay. Now, yeah, so how many contracts are one of those two things?
Most of them. Yeah, so like most of the contract, and I'm saying this very skeptically because obviously it's very difficult to actually go and like find every contract and then categorize it because you'd have to read it. And that's like reading a very, very, very big book, and I'm not going to do that in my time. But a lot of them are tokens. But so, were you here for my presentation a bit earlier? Okay, so there's a company called Known Origin, and what they're doing is pretty much exactly that, is doing verifiable digital artworks though. But there are other ones for verifiable videos, short stories, like animations, like original content, and like you should go check them out. Just put Ethereum at the end and then blockchain of whatever you're Googling, something will come up.
Yeah, so to actually answer your question, the approach Tari's taken is that we don't have a what's called a Turing-complete smart contract platform. In Ethereum, you can literally write any computer code in principle. At Tari, we use templates. So there will be a pre-configured list of, you want tickets, that's this kind of template. If you want to issue digital media, that'll be that kind of template. And we expect and hope that the open source community will contribute the kind of templates that they want, and then we will help integrate it and vet it. And then you don't have to be a developer to issue that kind of digital asset on the Tari network. If you want a loyalty point system for your spaza shop or your bakery or whatever it is, you don't know anything about coding, it's fine. You just go into the Tari system, click loyalty point system, issue, and submit, and it'll get put out for you. That's the advantages of just using templates rather than generic smart contracting platforms. So the actual answer to your question is, if you guys want it, you can build it. But yeah, it's right now, we're kind of focusing on tickets and collectibles right now.
Gotta really want it.
And one over there.
Dumelang le kae?
Thing, guy.
Okay. My name is Lehlohonolo Monareng. I come from Kiwa, an emerging world-class blockchain company. What I have for you is basic 3 questions. Number 1, what are your general limitations or challenges so far from your individual industries separately? Number 2 is, what are some of the things that you have done so far to bring about appetite in the market, your markets, regarding adaptation to the blockchain tech as it is? Hope it makes sense, that one. Number 3, last question is, how can we get hold of you, the 3 of you? Thank you.
Good question.
Could you just repeat the first question? Sorry, my short-term memory is terrible.
No, it's just regarding your general limitations or challenges regarding the use of blockchain tech as we know it today.
Okay, so one of the projects that I work on is called Protea. And it's an app that allows you to have like communities on the blockchain. So you could RSVP for events, but it's specifically about community building rather than like tickets. It's more for like, if you attend the past 10 like conferences, then you'll get a like cheaper ticket. You know, it's more to incentivize people to actually come. And one of the biggest problems that we faced there was that like with these wallets, right, the public and private key, if you lose that, that's it. We can't make another one for you. It's gone. So one of our biggest problems was social recovery. So, you know, you say you have these 5 friends, and then we'll send them a little bit of your key, so that if you ever lose it, you can message those 5 friends and get your key back. So that was one of the biggest challenges we had, was this, like, it may be self-sovereign, but, you know, you're very used to being able to, like, if you forget your password, reset it. You can't do that on the blockchain. So that was one of our biggest challenges, was actually finding a way to allow you to be able to lose it and not like lose everything.
Yeah, so going on that, that was also one of the pain points we had. So what we decided to do was, because it's on online game on a mobile device, guys are going to go and put a 12-word passphrase to get into any kind of wallets on the app. It's a pain. So what we did is that any assets bought in the game will stay on our servers generally for the time being, and if you want to take your assets outside of the game, to different wallets, to different game, whatever the case may be, you can transfer it out for free of charge. And then we will tokenize assets with all the information that's been recorded during the time, and then it'll be transferred out. So we kind of de-risk the whole thing about losing people's passphrases or them losing their passphrase, because we don't want to take care of that, because there's no ways we can get it back. Like, those assets will be gone, and there's no way to actually retrieve it. The more the pain points were more on the augmented reality side and mobile, the GPU was bigger pain points for us, so yeah.
Yeah, from our side, I think there's 2 main challenges. The one is, I think, objectively, the user experience in cryptocurrency is terrible, as Madam Speaker's mother will attest. So at Atari, we're trying to make it as easy as anything else that you use, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, that transferring Tari and digital assets on the Tari network is literally a brain-dead easy exercise. So that's our first challenge. The second one is that we're fighting with this build it and they will come kind of mentality that is kind of prevalent in the blockchain space. There are, I'm not kidding, thousands of projects out there. And you've heard of 3 of them maybe. The thing is, like, they're not really thought out. They tend to be this, oh, we've got this cool idea and people are just gonna come flock to us. So what we're trying to flip it on its head, and we're definitely trying to dog food the technology. So the ticketing use case is that we actually have a revenue generating ticket company running in San Francisco right now. And we want to prove that you can run a ticketing company on a blockchain, which is, as I said earlier, like literally the worst use case in terms of transactions per second and demand that you can possibly conceive of to run on this kind of technology. So those 2 things.
And I think the last question was, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter.
So, Michael Dion on Twitter.
Yeah. You can
yeah,
come find
that's
us.
yeah.
What was your second question, though?
My second question is
Just shout, it's fine.
How do you guys foster
Okay, so, yeah, no, I got you. I remember now. So with Protea, for example, the lead for Protea would go to events and be like, hey, would you guys like to have your event on the blockchain, you know? We'll make it as easy to use that your users won't even know. A good blockchain app is one you don't know it's on the blockchain. So, you know, that's one of my favorite sayings. So they would like go and approach people. So you like, especially one of the big problems is people think people are just gonna find you. Your app is the next big thing, you know? But if no one knows it exists, it's not gonna be the next big thing. So you have to like actively reach out and try like build a community around your project.
Yeah, so we're just trying to dog food our technology and you know, get excitement out that way. But you can find us tari.com. There's some swag in your conference bags. tari.com. I'm at Kale Sharrock on Twitter. And join the conversation. We'd love to. If you can code, come talk to me.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. It's the main focus was trying to get the game out, because I mean, how many games are there? Like, it's just 10, right? So trying to focus on being the best possible augmented reality experience, gaming-wise, was the main focus, because if that brings in the people, then that will make whatever blockchain assets we've used would be more accessible, more known about, and we can push that drive through that. So the focus was never to say, we blockchain, look at us, like, because everyone's just doing that. So we're trying to make the best user-friendly, don't know, it's a blockchain app ever. Yeah.
We have a question right there at the back.
Oh, I'm here first, sorry. Is this on? Yeah. The question I had was really, I mean, I've been in and out, sorry, I've been running around a bit, but the Fakugezi Festival and also the conference is very much about creative economies, cultural economies, and I mean, you clearly all very established, more than I think anyone else in this room, around what blockchain is and experiences working in that space. And I was just wondering, like, what is your kind of like totally speculative, crazy fantasy, probably completely undoable image of what blockchain could do for cultural and creative economies?
Ooh, I like that. I never get to go off the rails. So, like, I think especially with like what I was talking about with like having these traceable images and like actually knowing that you have a legit copy, I think that's so important, because when the digital age came out, a lot of creatives suddenly like kind of lost their income, because now if you put your image on the internet, everyone can get it. If you put your movie on the internet, everyone can get it, you know? And that really did affect a lot of industries, especially for smaller artists. You know, the big movie industries could always do a cinema release and make their money. But if you're doing like a small film or an animated film, it's very difficult if people are torrenting it or not contributing towards, because you put in work. Like, it didn't just come out of nowhere, you know, and you need to eat. So I think being able to prove provenance and ownership of digital assets will really make a huge impact in like the creative sphere, especially the digital creative sphere.
Yeah, I'm 100% with Veronica there. I did so I did a talk a couple months ago at the Goethe Institute. I'll share it on my Twitter, so you guys want to follow, head over there. I'll share the same presentation just to kind of add towards what that is and kind of give you ideas. Like, I think it's 5 or 6 different ideas of what how blockchain can impact different industries, from music, ticketing systems, all that is on that document.
Yeah, digital ownership of is 100% something that I'd love to see. In fact, I'd love to see it on the Tari network. So, you know, I think we're kind of more laser focused on that sort of use case. I think it would be amazing if small people could sell their digital creations, like movies, songs, whatever, and sell it to their audiences without requiring people to sign up with a credit card or anything like that. You could literally connect and pay per second, like in tiny little increments, and pay for your content that you're downloading without having to register an account or anything. You can imagine the kind of freedom that permits, freedom from artists to get their content out there without having to get massive record contracts or, you know, tied into rent-seeking conglomerates, and freedom for consumers. We see what's happening in Hong Kong right now, where people are. The mass surveillance culture of China is creeping in there, and people are like exercising their right to to keep that at bay. But they need to be very careful about how they do that, because the surveillance system is prevalent there. Blockchain is largely about freedom, and it's largely about trust. And when you're analyzing what blockchain gives you, you've got to answer those questions. It's like, do I want to give you freedom, and where's my trust? And if you don't want to trust a corporation, or you don't want to trust your government, that's where blockchain technology comes in. So we see a lot of deplatforming on places in Silicon Valley, companies like Twitter and Facebook and what's the other one? YouTube and all these places. Why did the companies get to say what content's on there or not? That's maybe just my libertarian kind of opinions coming out there, but if you believe in freedom of speech and freedom of expression, then that's where I think the creative space can kind of get involved. I think that's something that we could definitely see eye to eye on and work together on.
Oh, I had one more comment. I'm so sorry. He briefly said something called rent seeking. So on Spotify, you pay for Spotify, and then the artists get a cut. It is a very small cut, and it's proportional to how many streams rather than you directly. So, and most social media platforms you go on, there's horrible ads everywhere, all the time. But if you were to put it on the blockchain in such a way that no one knows it's on the blockchain, you could be paying the content creators directly. There's no middleman taking a cut, There's no, example, YouTube. There was a huge demonetizing of videos a while ago, and a lot of artists actually lost their stream of income because they just didn't make the cut. But if that was on the blockchain, you could directly, you'd pay a subscription monthly. Medium is a good example. You pay a subscription monthly, and then your claps, your likes, however many likes you give to that article is how much of your subscription they get a portion of. So you could do the same thing on YouTube and Instagram and kind of go undo this horrible adpocalypse that's happened everywhere. And then also the creators then get more funds for their work, because there's no middleman taking a cut out.
I just want to double check. Do we still have time for 2 more questions? Great. Can we have a mic over there and a mic to Fiona as well? Oh, there we go. Yeah.
So it picks up a little bit on what Kel was saying just before. I'm conscious of your headquarters being to some extent in San Francisco, and Michael's token sale was in dollars, and conscious that the 3 of you are white. And so I would just like it if you could speak a little bit to the context of working in tech in South Africa at this level. Of being a woman, of, who's doing the work, how accessible is all of this stuff to, Tembi's mom or whatever, yeah?
Shout out to my mom.
She's the star of the show. So, a while ago, when was it? The East Hackathon. When was that? Earlier this year, yeah. There was a hackathon in South Africa down in Cape Town. And I've gone to some of the other hackathons overseas, and they're very different. Here, it was so interesting to see this cross-section between blockchain solutions and African problems. And I found it really fascinating because overseas, they'll be doing what's I don't know what a good word to describe it, but they'll take a blockchain solution that's already been created and then do something on top of that. And then next year, they'll do something on top of that. And they're not, it's a bottom-up solution or top-down. Either way, it's a blockchain on blockchain on blockchain solution. They're not actually solving a real-world problem. They're solving a blockchain problem with another blockchain problem. Whereas in the Cape Town hackathon that happened, it was fascinating to see one of the projects was actually an AI for learning African languages. So it would send you a short little soundbite, and you would say what word was said in that little soundbite. And then you'd get paid for translating it. And then they would send it to someone else to make sure you both came up with the same word. And if you couldn't hear it clearly, you'd say, I can't hear it clearly, and it would give you a different section, And that was such an interesting thing because, AIs are actually really bad with South African languages. Siri doesn't do that, And it was just fascinating to see. They were okay, here's the problem. Let's use this incredible technology to actually do something in the real world and solve this real world problem, rather than just solving another blockchain problem with another blockchain thing, Yeah. And being a female, only 3% of all blockchain developers are female. Don't hold me on that number though, but it's around there, which is atrocious. But I don't think it's necessarily blockchain's fault. Like a lot of people are like, oh, blockchain's culture is toxic, but I don't think it actually is. I have not been like harassed in any way at any kind of blockchain event or community or anything. I think it's more of the fact that like women are discouraged from going into tech at such a young age that by the time you filter into this really sub-niche of programming, there's just not a lot of females because there's not a lot from the ground up. And that's my take.
Yeah, so adding on to that, the first thing is trying to actually find general guys that know anything about blockchain, know how to program in any kind of blockchain. Coding types, also on the creative fronts with 3D animators, modelers, that are in the gaming industry specifically, was a ball ache, like to say the least. And we're predominantly only South African company. We're based in Cape Town. All the money we raised was from Bitcoin, but we used it to ZAR, so we're completely kind of South African based. But the whole ecosystem is incredibly hard to find. The guys that do know have been taken up by big corps and get paid 3 times the amount that we can offer, right? And we only had one lady in the team that was out of 8, right? But we specifically tried to find a diversified amount of people, but the amount of people actually around is so minimal that we just could take whatever we could get, to be very honest.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add. It's hard.
So we had a gentleman over there. That will be our last question. Yes.
Hi. Is this on? Okay, there we go. So I sort of have 3 questions. One, are the NFTs limited in the sense that can you create an infinite number, or do you only have to create up to a certain amount so that you can create that provenance element? And then 2, you sort of highlighted that part of the reason why it's more or less trustworthy is because it's so expensive to corrupt, because the processing is so difficult to do or so costly. Is that not about to change in the next few years when the processing gets a bit cheaper? Will that not make it easy to corrupt? And in the last part, being that it's more or less a democratized or decentralized system, if processing is so difficult, doesn't that just create a whole new normal where you take the processing from the banks, the governments, and you go give it to a few people who can process the transactions on the coin because the rest of us really can't?
Sorry, before our panelists answer that, the lady that had her hand up, could you please just pass the mic to her? You'll be our last person to give a question.
Okay, so for your first question, you can create as many NFTs as you want. Like, if you want 5, you can make 5. If you want 100, you can make it's only limited by how much you can afford the gas. Yeah, and then for your second question, I'm going to hand it over. I don't want to touch that.
Right, so if we talk about Bitcoin specifically, right, as I said, the proof of work puzzle is tunable. You can decide how difficult that puzzle is. And in Bitcoin, the algorithm is set so that no matter how much processing power is churning away solving that puzzle, it adjusts the difficulty so that blocks come out every 10 minutes on average. So 10 years ago when Bitcoin was invented and there were literally like 3 computers mining Bitcoin, it took very little CPU power to mine a Bitcoin. And then they went on to graphics cards, and then they went into fancy custom-built homemade chips, and then into now it's like commoditized custom-built chips for mining Bitcoin. And these are order of magnitude efficiency improvements every time. The difficulty of that proof of work just ratchets up in tandem, and so that the pace of Bitcoin mining stays, the blocks get emitted every 10 minutes on average. So to answer your third question, so that's your second question, right? The third question is actually a very good one. As these things are called application-specific integrated circuits, these things that mine Bitcoin, or ASICs. They're manufactured in expensive fabrication units like Intel, similar to what Intel and AMD would do. And so right now, we kind of do have a bit of a centralization happening where it's literally big business, and these guys own massive warehouses just full of these things, and they're just churning up Bitcoin, and a lot of them in China. So that is a bit of a concern in Bitcoin, but the thinking is that ultimately the problem solves itself, because As these ASICs kind of get more and more efficient and cheaper, they become like what SD cards now or SIM cards. Everyone can just go and buy them at the grocery market, and they generate a lot of heat, and you can use them to heat your water, your house in winter, or what have you. And so the idea is that we've kind of gone through this point of a little bit of centralization of Bitcoin mining now, but in future we think it's going to decentralize again. And so this problem just goes away. But we'll see.
I just wanted to add one point. There are other ways of doing it. That's called the consensus method, to butcher the words. But anyway, so that's proof of mining. You also get proof of stake, which Ethereum is actually moving to soon, TM, because it's been years, which is instead of you having to do these really complicated algorithms to like mine a block, on proof of stake what you do is you put up your money. So let's say I have 100 ETH. Yo, I wish. And I put up my 100 ETH. And I mine the block. And then someone finds out that like I lied, I put in a transaction there that was not valid or not true. They slash my ETH, so they'll take it away. So it's a different method where you don't need these expensive CPUs to run it, and your incentives are still kind of the same, because if you lie about it, you're gonna lose money. And I think there are minimum amounts that you have to stake, and it's called proof of stake. So there are different methods that go about solving that like problem of proof of work differently. There's actually quite a few, and they're really interesting. So if you're interested, just go on Wikipedia.
But if you're really interested, you can come talk to me and I'll tell you why proof of stake's a terrible idea.
Yeah, just to add to the first one, with tokenized assets, non-fungible tokens, you can make as many as you want, or you can have finite amounts. You also can lock the assets. So once you make 10, example, of CryptoKitty, you are, even as a developer, will not be able to make any more of those. It's locked at 10, that's all you're going to get done. Or you can have tokens that you can create 100,000 and then have it open up where you can just add more to the pool whenever you need, like a gold or something in the game, for example. The rest of the stuff, get cleared.
Okay. So as a head of social impact and human capital innovation for Animation SA, I'm always pushing the animation and gaming training on various levels. So one of the things that, we're doing market research into looking at where the skills needs are and so forth. And because of pushing and fighting within government to make sure that our voice is heard, I've somehow found myself on a Brains Trust group that's looking at 4IR and the future of work, which I will be focusing on animation and gaming. So I'd like to get some ideas from you guys on what do you think are some training solutions to address some of the skill shortages that you're dealing with?
YouTube tutorials. Yeah.
Also, like conferences like this, where you can come and ask questions about people who know, and then afterwards you can go have a 20-minute conversation and like pick up the learning. Because especially with like blockchain stuff, there's a very steep learning curve before you can actually understand what's going on. You need to pick up all the jargon and the weird words and the weird like terminology that they use before you can actually be like, oh, I understand how that works. And then once you understand how it works, then you can build on that. But I think especially in-person events, and like I do lots of online conferences that are completely free, and you can come and I will teach you a very specific thing, and you'll end of it, like you'll walk away and you'll be like, okay, I kind of get that, but you know enough that you can go do your own research without the words like completely not making sense. Yeah, so I think it's really important to have these kind of events where you can actually learn, because you need that initial step before you can learn the rest of it. But yeah, online courses, online YouTubes.
You're coming in through the back door.
Yeah, so I mean, at Tari, we're trying to bridge that gap by making the issuance of digital assets as easy as possible. So right now, if you want to create a website, you probably, because you use websites so often, you kind of know what you want, and so you can at least talk the language, and then you go hire some developers, and they execute on your vision. I think on blockchain, we're not even there yet. So Tari is trying to get to the point where we can at least execute on that vision, and you tell us this is what you want, and we can say, oh, that's already there, or we need to build a new template in order for you to have that digital asset issued, and then it becomes user-driven. You can issue them and you can control it.
I love that everyone has so many questions, and unfortunately, we don't have any more time.
Aww.
I know, right? But But I'm sure Michael, Kale, and Veronica, you are still here, right? So you can approach them afterwards and have a deeper conversation. But as we wrap up this session, I think we've downloaded a lot of information today. Right, it's been a long, exciting day. And if you could just briefly, in a sentence or two, what would you like the audience to walk away with from your... Michael, I see you're laughing. I think it's because a sentence or two might be impossible for you, but let's set it up as a challenge. What would you like the audience to walk away with from your presentation?
We were only laughing because we were talking about this before. It comes up all the time.
I'm psychic as well.
Okay, so if you walk away with one thing, I'd like you, if you hear about the blockchain hype, think about it. Think about the problems that blockchain solves. Think about the problem that you're trying to solve, and measure the overlap. And I think you'll find more often than not, the overlap is less than the hype lets you believe. Blockchain solves very specific problems. I'm not to say it doesn't solve your problems. It may. But it is very specific problems.
Shit.
My takeaway would be that, yeah, a lot of use cases don't work, but the use cases that do work really, really, really well and can actually have a real world impact. But most of them don't. Yeah.
Okay, so they cleared everything that's great. So I'm going to say something more going to trigger you both. Just for the funds. One of the best use cases that I've seen in blockchain, and I'm a maxi for it, XRP and Ripple is better than Bitcoin and Ethereum.
We're not friends now.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for our panelists, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we are almost at the time where we say goodbye to one another. I'm getting very, very sad because I've enjoyed this time with you. But we've heard so much today, right? And I want to get some audience engagement in terms of if you could perhaps, if someone or a couple of people could just volunteer to, what did you get out of today's conference? And how do you think you can apply it to your own creativity, to your own businesses? Where's my sacrificial lamb? Oh, what a gent. Can I have a mic over here, please? Please introduce yourself and what you do.
I'm Wesley. I'm currently a student, and me and my team are in the beginnings of starting our studio, a game design studio. And we're very interested in, obviously, this technology I was speaking about, like tokenizing digital assets and cross-platform assets sounds very interesting, because now, at the beginning of our studio, we can start designing games that are going to be cross-platform, and then we have assets that move between our games, right? And we love that idea, and we thank you for sharing it.
Thank you. I saw some hands as well. Right there, at the back, I think.
Sanibonani.
Njani.
I learned something very interesting from today's changing currencies. Ne? One of the most important things I learned, like in the creative industries, don't make money, make sense. You know, because as the fourth industrial revolution is taking its toll internationally, wealth is organized technological capability to protect, nurture, educate, and accommodate forward futuristic days of humanity. So the goal for us all people in the creative industries is to make it sorry guys. The goal for all of us who are part of these creative industries is to make it metaphysical, omniplanetary, omnicosmic wealth, know-how capitalism. Wealth, know-how, invisible know-how in order to change the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Can we have some more thoughts from our audience who'd like to share? You know, for me, coming from a tech background myself, I used to be an investment banker. And I fell into the creative world accidentally through a family member. And when we were having the conversation, stories across silos, I thought of some of the kids in my program. So we teach computer programming to kids in rural areas using satellites, right? And another thing we do is reward-based education. And I was thinking about how all these young people have an outlet of creativity, but the biggest fear in them is, how am I going to make money, right? And this has been a stumbling block for so many people, because traditionally we've grown up, for one, I was brought up in either I'll become an accountant or I'll become a doctor, because my parents couldn't see any way in me being able to monetize art. I wanted to be an actress, right? And today, being your MC gave me the opportunity. But that is the biggest fear that we have. And I love what you mentioned about what the biggest thing that stood out for you in today's conference is that art isn't always about the money, it's about making sense. But we need to remember that in order for our art to live on, to be able to be shared with the masses, it needs to be sustainable, right? And conferences like this, and just to mention that if you at any point left the conference and you're worried that you might missed out on stuff, the Goethe Institute is streaming this on their Facebook page, so you can watch and catch up on everything that you might have missed. But it's important that conferences like this happen because it gives us an outlay and it gives us an opportunity to feed into how do we make sustainable livings through our art for the benefit not only of ourselves, but for the benefit of the people that come after us. Because as artists, the best thing about us as creatives is that we approach communities not from a point of our want, but from a point of the people's needs. Thank you so much for coming to this wonderful, wonderful conference. Just a quick reminder that after this, there will be an animation screening right in this room. So please, please do not leave, because shortly after that, the screening of CJ Obasi's Hello Rain will happen here as well. How exciting. We are just the gift that keeps on giving, yes? We just keep giving the people what they want. Thank you once again for paying your rent. I have been seeing those tweets. Keep them coming, keep them coming, keep them coming. Thank you to our panelists and to our amazing audience. Yes, please. Don't leave yet. Please, oh, sorry. Sorry.
Just very quickly, so the animations that you're about to see were screened as part of yesterday's It was an open call that was sent out from Animation SA to the Fakugezi community asking for short films, motion graphics, and title sequences. They gave awards yesterday to the runners-up of the various pieces, and we've promised that we will show them this evening following the conference. So that was just a quick introduction to what you're about to see. So please take a minute to watch them. I see there's also people like hustling the blockchain people. What do we need to know more of? But you're welcome to do that as well. But for those of you who are here, please free and watch the animations, and then the CJ Obasi Hello Rain will be showing afterwards. So if you wanted to take a 5-minute break, no, let's not do that. Let's watch the animations, right? They're so beautiful. Okay, thanks very much. You can put them up.